I was tied to the old wooden bed in the middle of the night. My 4 sons stood in front of me, each one of them with cold eyes, blank faces. My husband stood by the door, arms folded, watching. He didn't stop them. Instead, he said in a calm, chilling voice, "Make her suffer, and when you're done I'll take my turn." That moment shattered me. It was the same house where I had raised them, bathed them, fed them, sang lullabies when they were sick. But now those same boys, blood of my blood, turned into monsters, commanded by the man I once trusted with my whole life. I screamed, kicked, but my hands were tied, and my voice only made them laugh louder. That night changed everything. But it wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. Because after that night, I planned my revenge. My name is Margaret. I was born in a small village where people believed a woman's job was to serve her husband and raise children. I married young, just 17, because my parents said I had no choice. My husband, Richard, was older than me by 10 years. He was strong, quiet, and respected. But behind closed doors, he had a temper that could burn the sky. First he only shouted. Then slowly the shouting turned into slaps. Then fists. Then nights where he'd lock the door and do things to me that I didn't understand but made me feel small and dirty. But I stayed. Because the village would say I was the problem if I left. Because I had nowhere to go. Because I was pregnant with our first son, David. Then came Peter, then John, then the youngest Luke. For boys. Everyone said I was blessed. That boys were a sign of strength and favor from God. But no one knew that those boys watched their father beat me. They heard the screams. They saw the bruises. And no one taught them that it was wrong. I still remember one day when David was just 10. He slapped me across the face because I asked him to wash his hands before eating. Richard laughed. "He's becoming a man," he said. That was the first time I felt afraid of my own child. But I told myself they were still young, that I could raise them better, that somehow love would fix everything. I worked like a slave, cooked, cleaned, cared for them all. I smiled even when my heart was bleeding. I kissed their cheeks at night, even when my back ached from the beatings. But love didn't fix them. They grew cold. They grew rough. They spoke to me like I was a thing. Like I didn't matter. Still I stayed. Until that night, when everything finally broke. But let me take you back a bit. 3 months before that night, I had started keeping a small diary. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to talk to someone, even if it was just a piece of paper. I hid it under the kitchen floorboard. In it I wrote everything. Every slap. Every name they called me. Every tear I shed. And I started writing something else too. Ideas. Ideas for escape. Ideas for revenge. At the same time I started pretending. Smiled more. I acted more obedient. I served their food just the way they liked it. I gave Richard warm water to bathe even when I had to boil it with firewood outside in the cold. I said yes sir to the boys when they barked orders. I made them believe I had accepted my fate. But in my heart something dangerous was growing. Fire. One evening, I saw Luke trying to force himself on a young neighbor girl. She was just 13. I rushed out, grabbed his shirt and pulled him back. He slapped me so hard my ears rang. I reported him to Richard. Richard shrugged. "She's a girl. She'll get over it." I knew then I wasn't just dealing with broken men. I was dealing with devils. But devils can bleed too. I started watching them. What time they left the house, when they came back, who they talked to, what they feared. I learned Peter was scared of snakes. I learned David was terrified of fire. I learned John couldn't swim. I learned Luke had nightmares about getting locked in small spaces. I was storing their weaknesses. But I had to be patient. Then came the night before it all exploded. I had prepared dinner, and Richard said the soup was too salty. He threw the bowl at me. It hit my arm and I felt a crack. I think it was fractured, but I had no time to cry. Peter grabbed my other arm, twisted it behind me and forced me to kneel. And then all 4 of them started laughing. They pushed me around like a toy. Richard sat with his bottle of gin and smiled. I remember him saying, You belong to us. You're not going anywhere. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The next day I took a walk to the forest. I found a hidden spot and dug a hole with my bare hands. I buried some items there. A knife, matches, rat poison, and a picture of each of my sons. One by one, I said their names as I covered the hole. "This is where your evil ends," I whispered. When I got home I was calm. The house smelled of alcohol. Peter was drunk. Luke was laughing at something on his phone. David was yelling at a neighbor outside. John was upstairs breaking something. And Richard. He sat at the center of it all, proud of what he had created. I looked at all of them, and I knew my moment would come. I just didn't know. It would be that same night. That night I was dragged from my room. They said I had refused to cook. But I had cooked. I always cooked. It was just another excuse. They tied me to the bed. My sons surrounded me. Richard gave the command. And that was when the worst happened. "Begged." I screamed. No one listened. And when they were done, Richard stepped forward and whispered in my ear, "I told you. You are nothing but our slave." They left me bleeding, tied up like an animal. But I wasn't broken. I was reborn. As I lay in the dark, I smiled for the first time in years. Because now they had given me the one thing I needed to do what I had been planning all along. A reason to destroy them completely. And just as I was thinking that, I heard the sound of footsteps. Not leaving the room but coming back. And this time it wasn't Richard. It was someone else. Someone who had seen everything. And they were holding something in their hand. The door creaked open slowly. I turned my head toward the sound, my body still tied to the bed, every bone in pain, my skin raw, my soul burning. I held my breath, expecting Richard or one of the boys to return and continue the torture. But it wasn't any of them. It was my neighbor's daughter, Mary. She stood in the doorway holding a flashlight and a stick in her hand. Her eyes widened in horror when she saw me tied up, blood running down my arms and legs, my dress torn. "Auntie Margaret," she gasped, running toward me. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. All I could whisper was, "They did this." Tears welled in her eyes. She dropped the stick and started working on the ropes around my wrists and ankles. Her hands were shaking. "I saw everything through the window," she said, sobbing. I waited until they left the room. I had to help you." When she finally untied me, I couldn't stand. My legs gave way beneath me. Mary caught me and helped me sit on the floor. My chest heaved and I cried, not from pain but from the strange feeling of kindness. It had been so long since someone had touched me without hurting me. She helped me cover myself with a bedsheet, then looked at me with panic. "We have to tell someone. We have to go to the police." But I shook my head. "No," I said firmly. "They'll deny it. Say I'm crazy. They have power in this village. No one will believe me. Then what will you do?" I looked into her eyes. "I will finish what I started." Mary stared at me, confused. "What do you mean?" But I didn't explain. Not yet. With her help, I crawled into the bathroom. She boiled some water and helped clean my wounds. The pain was unbearable, but I gritted my teeth. Had to be strong. She gave me some of her mother's clothes. I changed into them and tucked the diary from under the kitchen floor into the dress. It was my truth, my proof, my plan. That night, Mary helped me sneak into the small storage shed behind our house. She said I could rest there while she kept watch. I thanked her, my heart full of gratitude. But my mind stayed sharp. This was not the time to cry. This was the time to fight. I knew Richard would come looking for me in the morning. And when he didn't find me, he'd lie. He'd tell the neighbors I ran away. That I was mad. That I had brought shame to the family. So I needed to disappear for now. At dawn, I slipped away from the shed, covering my face with a scarf. I walked barefoot down the quiet dirt road leading out of the village and headed to the one place I never thought I'd return to. My mother's old house in the hills. She had died years ago, and the place had been abandoned. But the roof still held, and it gave me shelter. I spent 2 days there, healing, thinking, writing in my diary. I went into the forest and dug up the hole I had hidden, retrieving the knife, the matches, and the poison. Now it was time to use them. But not how you think. I didn't want to kill them in rage. I wanted them to feel what I had felt. To suffer like I had. To lose everything like I had. So I waited until Sunday. Every Sunday, my sons and Richard would go to the village square to drink and brag. They would talk about how they controlled the house. How no woman could ever disobey them. I showed up at the square. The moment Richard saw me, his eyes widened. "You," he said, laughing in disbelief. "You came back." The villagers turned, staring. I looked beaten, yes. But my voice was calm, loud, and steady. "I have something to say," I told them. He stepped forward. "Go back home before I drag you." "I have something to say," shouted. The square went quiet. I pulled out my diary and read the first page aloud. Every beating, every slap, every cruel word. Every time he ordered the boys to hurt me. Every date, every detail. I read it all. People stood frozen. Whispers ran through the crowd. Richard lunged at me, but this time I was ready. I pulled out the knife, not to stab him but to make him stop. He froze. That's when Mary stepped out from the crowd. "She's telling the truth," she cried. "I saw them. I saw everything." Gasps echoed around the square. The village elders gathered quickly. One of them, Elder Thomas, asked me to hand over the diary. I did. He read it silently for a long moment. Then he turned to Richard. "You will be investigated." Richard laughed. On the words of a crazy woman and a girl. But something had changed. The villagers had seen my scars. They had seen my eyes. They had heard my voice. And some of the women, they knew. 'Cause it had happened to them too. I wasn't the only one. Suddenly, other voices rose. "She's not lying. He beat her like a dog. I saw it too." Richard and the boys tried to leave the square, but it was too late. The elders stopped them. They were placed under house watch while the village council opened a hearing. But this wasn't enough for me. Well, because even if justice came, it would take time. And they would still sleep in their beds, eat their meals, breathe easy. So I planned again. I returned to the house that night. Hidden in the shadows. I waited until they all fell asleep. And then, I slipped into the kitchen and mixed just a drop of rat poison into the pot of palm wine on the table. Not enough to kill. Just enough to make them violently sick. The next morning I heard the news from Mary. All 4 boys and Richard were vomiting blood. They were rushed to the local healer, who said it was poison. Panic spread. But the healer saved them. Barely. Everyone suspected someone had done it, but no one knew who. Until I returned to the square the next day. Holding the same knife and my diary. I knelt before the elders. "I poisoned them," I said. "But I didn't kill them. Because I want them alive, to suffer." Gasps filled the air. Richard, bruised and pale, shouted, "She's a witch." But Elder Thomas raised his hand. "Enough." He turned to me. "Why did you confess?" "Because I want to speak my truth. I want every woman here to know that silence is not safety. I want justice. Real justice." The elders went into council. By sunset, a judgment was passed. Richard and the boys were banished from the village for life. Their house was given to me. The people bowed their heads in respect. But that night, as I sat alone in my room, finally mine, I heard a stone hit the window. I walked to it and saw a letter on the ground. I picked it up with trembling hands. It read, "You think it's over. We'll come back for you. All of us. We'll finish what we started." I stared at the letter in my shaking hands. The words burned into my mind like fire. "We'll come back for you. All of us. We'll finish what we started." It wasn't signed. But I knew. I knew it was from them, my husband and my 4 sons. They had been banished from the village that morning. But darkness still followed me. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Fear crawled up my spine like a cold snake. I locked all the doors and windows. I pulled every curtain. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. I knew those men. I had lived with them. And one thing I had learned was this. When a monster is wounded, it becomes more dangerous. I sat alone in the old living room, lit by only a small kerosene lamp. My fingers gripped the knife tightly. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. The next morning I went straight to the village council with the letter. Elder Thomas frowned as he read it, stroking his white beard. He called the other elders. "This is a serious threat," he said. "But since they've already been banished, we cannot arrest them unless they return. So they have to hurt me again before you act?" I asked, my voice rising. There was silence. Mary, who had come with me, took my hand. She shouldn't be left alone. The elders agreed to send 2 young men, Daniel and Marcus, to guard my house in shifts for 1 week. Just 1 week. They said if no more threats appeared, the protection would stop. 1 week. I knew it wouldn't be enough. Still, I thanked them. The boys came that evening. They were kind, but they didn't understand the kind of evil we were dealing with. They treated it like a simple village disagreement. That night I finally got some sleep, knowing someone was outside watching. But on the 4th day, everything changed again. It rained that night. Thunder roared like angry spirits, and lightning lit up the sky in angry flashes. At around midnight I heard something, glass breaking. My eyes snapped open. I grabbed the knife under my pillow. "Daniel!" called out. No answer. I crept through the hallway, my heart pounding. Rain pounded on the roof. I reached the living room and gasped. The back window had been smashed. Water dripped through the broken frame. Footprints, muddy, fresh, ran across the floor. Someone was inside. I backed away slowly, my knife ready. Suddenly, a voice whispered behind me. "Looking for me." I spun around and saw him. David, my eldest son, soaked and wild-eyed, his face twisted in rage. Before I could scream, he lunged at me. I slashed the knife through the air, grazing his arm. He screamed and grabbed his shoulder but kept coming. We struggled, slipping in the rainwater, his hands around my neck. Then bang. The front door burst open, and Daniel ran in, swinging a stick hard across David's back. David collapsed, groaning. Marcus followed with a lantern. "We've got him," he shouted. They tied David up and dragged him outside in the pouring rain. He spat on the ground and shouted, "You think this is over? My brothers are coming. And this time we won't leave anyone alive." They handed him over to the elders. The council decided David had broken the banishment and tried to kill me. He would be taken to the district police, far away from the village. He screamed and fought, but they dragged him away in chains. Everyone thought the danger was over. But I knew better. Because David had warned me. The others were coming. And they wouldn't fail like him. I stayed alert for the next few days. No more letters came. No more broken windows. But something strange began to happen. At night, I'd hear whispers outside my house. Footsteps crunching on gravel. Shadows moving through the bushes. They were watching me. I was sure. I told the elders again. They promised to keep checking, but they said maybe I was just scared after everything. That maybe it was my mind playing tricks. But I knew what I saw. One night, I lit a fire and sat outside the house with a lantern and my knife. I stared into the darkness, daring them to come out. And that's when I saw them. 3 shadows standing beyond the trees. Peter. Luke. They didn't move. They just stood and watched. I stood too. I didn't speak. I didn't run. I let them see that I wasn't afraid. But I knew it was only a matter of time. The next day, I met Mary by the river. She had been helping me every day, bringing food, listening to me, encouraging me. "I think they're planning something," I told her. "Then we'll plan something too," she said, eyes fierce. I smiled at her. "You're braver than most women in this village." He smiled back. "I've learned from you." That night, I moved the knife from under my pillow to my waist. I carried it with me at all times. I placed bottles of ground pepper and broken glass at every window and door. I tied loud bells to the entrance so I'd hear anyone who tried to enter. I even hid a second knife in the cooking pot. Let them come. And they did. 3 nights later. It was quiet, too quiet. No wind. No rain. Just silence. I lay in bed pretending to sleep. Then ting. Ting. The bell at the back door rang. My eyes flew open. Crash. The door slammed open. They were in. I heard their footsteps. This time they didn't laugh. They didn't speak. They were silent. Deadly. I got up quietly and moved through the kitchen, grabbing the knife from the pot. I crouched by the door and waited. Suddenly, Peter stepped into the room, holding a wooden stick. I sprang up and slashed his thigh. He roared in pain and swung at me, but I ducked and kicked him hard in the stomach. He fell backward. I ran to the living room where I met John face to face. He grabbed my arm and tried to twist the knife from my hand. I bit his wrist hard. He screamed. I shoved him into the wall. Then I heard Luke's voice. Burn the house down. My blood ran cold. They weren't here to beat me. They were here to end me. I ran toward the front door, but flames were already growing on the curtain. They had poured kerosene around the room. Smoke filled my nose. Cough choked. Had to get out. But John grabbed me again. This time I stabbed him in the side. He screamed and dropped to the floor. Peter and Luke were stumbling, trying to escape the spreading fire. I crawled under the smoke and made it outside, coughing hard. Mary was already running down the hill with other villagers. Fire! Fire! People shouted. Buckets of water were passed from hand to hand. But the flames were too strong. My house, my home was burning to the ground. And inside it, John lay unmoving. One of the villagers managed to drag him out, barely breathing. Peter and Luke were caught trying to run away. The villagers beat them and tied them up. I sat on the ground watching the flames. I had nothing left. No roof, no bed, no diary. But I had something more important. I had survived again. And this time, they were the ones begging for mercy. As dawn broke, a man approached me quietly. He was dressed in a long brown coat, eyes sharp. "Are you Margaret?" he asked. I nodded slowly. He handed me a card. "My name is Inspector Graham," he said. "I've come from the city. We heard what happened. And we think your story may help us uncover something much, much bigger." I held the card in my hand, blinking at the name printed on it. Inspector Graham, Regional Criminal Investigation Department. My throat was dry. You came from the city." The man nodded, his eyes scanning the blackened remains of my house, now reduced to ashes. The scent of smoke still clung to the air. Villagers stood nearby, whispering, staring at me like I was something between a ghost and a warrior. "We received word from the district police," he said. "Your case isn't just about domestic abuse. It may be part of a pattern." I furrowed my brow. "What do you mean?" He looked me in the eye. "You're not the first woman in this region to be abused by her own family. But you're the first to survive long enough to speak." My hands trembled as I looked around. Peter and Luke were tied under a tree, bruised and whimpering. John lay on a stretcher, unconscious, barely breathing after inhaling thick smoke. David was still in police custody far from the village. And Richard, my husband, the monster who created all this, was still unaccounted for. No one knew where he had gone after the banishment. Inspector Graham continued. "We've started investigating similar reports from other villages. Women disappearing. Mad wives vanishing in the night. Girls locked away in their homes and never seen again." I swallowed hard. It wasn't just me. I was only one of many. "I want to help," I said. He nodded. "Then come with me. We'll get you medical treatment, a place to stay, and in return, I want your full story. Everything. Every detail." I glanced at what was left of my home, my body aching, my heart still raw. Then I looked at the horizon. Yes, I said. Take me. The city was nothing like my village. Tall buildings touched the sky, cars honked endlessly, and people rushed everywhere with busy eyes. I had never been there before, but Mary had insisted on coming with me. She sat beside me in the police van, holding my hand the whole journey. When we arrived, I was taken to a clean, quiet clinic. A kind nurse named Clara treated my wounds, gave me a fresh change of clothes, and for the first time in years, I slept on a soft bed. No knives under my pillow. No monsters waiting in the shadows. Just peace. But the next morning it was time to dig deep into my pain. I was taken to a room where Inspector Graham sat with a notebook and a small recorder. The walls were gray, the light dim, and the silence heavy. "Start from the beginning," he said softly. And I did. I told him everything. How Richard started hitting me when I was just a teen bride. How the boys copied his cruelty. How the house became a prison. How my cries were ignored by the world. I told him about the diary. Poison. The revenge. The fire. I left nothing out. When I finished, Graham leaned forward. "You're brave, Margaret. Do you know that?" I looked at him with tired eyes. "I don't want to be brave. I just want peace." He nodded. "You may have helped us open the door to stopping a wider ring of abuse across the region." I didn't understand how deep it went, until he showed me a folder. Inside were photos of other women. Old, young, thin, frail, all with pain in their eyes. "They were silenced," he said. "Some killed. Others still missing. We believe your husband may be connected to more than just your case." The words hit me like cold water. "What do you mean?" He took out one final picture. A group photo. Men smiling in suits. Richard stood at the center. "He was part of a secret network," Graham explained. "We believe they used their homes to hide crimes against women. And you, Margaret, might be the only one who knows the truth from inside." I stared at the photo. My husband wasn't just a cruel man. He was evil on a scale I couldn't imagine. My heart beat faster. My thoughts ran wild. Could it be that all those times he left home for business, he was hurting other women too? Suddenly everything made sense. The late-night calls. The strange men visiting the house. The times Richard refused to let me go outside or speak to visitors. I had been a prisoner not just to a man but to a system. And now, had a choice. Stay quiet or fight. Chose to fight. Mary and I were given a safe apartment in the city. Inspector Graham warned me that the investigation would take months, but they needed me to testify. I agreed. But I wasn't just sitting around. Began to heal. Slowly. Each morning, I walked to a small garden behind the shelter. I sat under a tree and wrote. Not just about pain but about strength. I started writing letters to the women in the photos. Not real letters to send, but words of hope. Messages I wished someone had written to me when I was trapped. One day Clara, the nurse, read them. She cried. "These words," she whispered. "They could save someone." So I began to read them at local women's centers. They called me Grandma Margaret, the woman who survived hell and came back stronger. Women started sharing their stories too. And I realized I wasn't alone anymore. But peace doesn't last forever. One evening, as I was walking home from the clinic, a black car followed us. Mary noticed it first. "It's the third time this week," she said, grabbing my hand. "It's him. It has to be Richard." We ran. Heart racing. Feet pounding. Turning corners, dodging cars. But the car kept coming. Finally, we reached the apartment and locked the doors behind us. Mary called Inspector Graham. By the time he arrived, the car was gone. But in its place was a note slipped under the door. This one was written in red ink. "You can run to the city. You can talk to the police. But you will always belong to me. I will get you back, Margaret. And this time, it will be the end." My knees buckled. Graham read it and his jaw clenched. "We'll find him," he said. But the fear returned. He was watching me. He was close. Somehow, he had escaped the investigation, the village banishment, the public shame. He had melted into the shadows again like a snake. And now I knew. If I didn't stop Richard myself, he would never stop coming. He had turned my sons into monsters. He had destroyed every part of my soul. Now he wanted to take what was left of my peace. But he didn't know one thing. I was no longer that scared young bride he had married. I was a survivor. And I was ready for him. The red-inked note shook me to my bones. You will always belong to me. I will get you back. And this time it will be the end. I sat on the floor, the paper trembling in my hand. Mary locked all the windows, drew the curtains tight, and stood beside me with wide, frightened eyes. My heart thudded like a drum, but this time I wasn't just afraid. I was angry. I had escaped death. I had exposed the evil. I had watched my sons fall one by one. And now the man who created it all, Richard, was hunting me again. But he didn't know I had changed. I was no longer his weak little wife. I was no longer afraid of the dark. I was the storm now. Inspector Graham returned to the apartment shortly after we called. He picked up the note with gloves and studied it closely. We'll start tracking every black vehicle within a 20-mile radius, he said. This is no longer just a domestic violence case. It's attempted murder, organized abuse, and now a direct threat to a protected witness. Mary looked at him. You need to hide her somewhere else. Somewhere he can't find her. But I raised my hand. No, I said. They both looked at me in shock. I'm tired of running. I won't live the rest of my life in hiding. If Richard wants to come for me, let him. This time I'll be ready. Graham hesitated. Margaret, you're not safe here. I'm not safe anywhere until he's caught, I said. So let's catch him. That night a plan was made. Graham would set up a trap. He had 2 plainclothes officers pose as maintenance workers around the apartment. One parked car, one inside the grocery store near the building, and one near the stairwell. He called it Operation Widow's Net. And I would be the bait. The next morning I did something bold. I went to the city market. Alone. I wore a simple blue dress. No scarf. No disguise. I walked slowly down the open aisles, my eyes scanning every face. My heart was pounding, but my steps were steady. The market buzzed with life. Children laughed, women bargained, and radios played loud music. But I felt eyes on me. Sharp eyes. Watching eyes. And bought tomatoes. Oil. I turned around and saw him. Richard. Standing at the end of the alley near a barber's shop, pretending to look at newspapers. My hands went cold. He looked thinner. Angrier. He's sunken. Skin darker from being on the run. But I knew that face. I had memorized it after years of pain. He saw me. And smiled. That same cruel smile he wore the night he told our sons to make me suffer. My legs told me to run, but I stayed rooted. I reached into my bag and clutched my phone. I sent the message. He's here. Market entrance. I saw him start walking toward me. 1 step. 2 steps. Then, he pulled something from his coat pocket. A silver object. Blade. I backed away slowly. Suddenly, 2 men tackled him from the side. Graham's officers. The knife flew out of his hand and skidded across the ground. People screamed. Vendors ducked. The market erupted in chaos. They wrestled him to the ground. He fought like a wild animal, spitting, punching, screaming my name. Margaret! You traitor! I gave you a home. I made you a mother. I stood frozen as he was cuffed and dragged to the police truck. My ears rang with his voice, but my soul felt light. He was finally caught. The last demon. The trial began 2 weeks later. It was a closed hearing, but I was allowed to attend. I stood face to face with all 5 of them. Richard, David, Peter, Luke. Each one of them wore the same thing, shame. Some hung their heads. Some glared with red eyes. But none of them could undo the truth. I stood in the witness box and spoke my truth for hours. I told the court about the first slap. The nights of pain. The screams no one heard. The sons who copied his every evil move. The betrayal. The fire. Poison. A letter. The stalking. I told them how a woman became a warrior. And I didn't cry. Not once. When I stepped down, the judge stared long at me before speaking. "You are not just a witness," he said. "You are living evidence of what strength looks like when the world fails you." The final judgment was loud and clear. Richard, life imprisonment. David, 20 years. Peter, 18 years. John, 15 years. Luke, 10 years in a juvenile correction center, with psychological supervision. It was done. They were gone. Not just from my life, but from the lives of every woman they could have harmed. I returned to the village months later. Alone. But not the same woman who left. I walked through the market and women greeted me with tears in their eyes. Some hugged me. Some whispered, "Thank you." Some knelt down and prayed over me. I was no longer that woman who got beaten. I was now Grandma Margaret, the woman who fought back. I rebuilt the house with help from a local charity group. Stronger this time. Bigger windows. Brighter paint. I turned one of the rooms into a small library for girls, filled with books, stories, letters of hope. Mary lived with me. She called me Mama now. She had become like a daughter I never had. She helped organize talks for young women, set up sewing classes, and taught reading lessons at night. Together we turned pain into purpose. But even in peace there were moments when memories came back. Nights when the wind howled too loudly. Dreams where the old house burned again. Echoes of laughter that once meant danger. But I would wake up, light a candle, and remind myself. I survived. And that was enough. Until one morning, I went to the back of the house to water the garden. I found something strange stuck in the fence. Piece of paper. Folded neatly. My heart skipped. I opened it slowly. Inside was a short note. No name. No threats. Just one question. What would you do if the next child you raise becomes like the ones you buried? When I woke up on the cold floor of the storehouse, I couldn't move my legs. My body felt broken and my heart even more so. The silence in the air was heavy, except for the rats scurrying in the corners and the faint sound of laughter from the house. I was too weak to scream, and even if I had the strength, I knew no one would come to help me. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. I couldn't tell. My only company was the hunger that twisted my stomach and the pain that throbbed through my body. My sons had done something unforgivable, and my husband. He was no longer human to me. I didn't cry anymore. I just stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "I will make them pay. One day they will all pay." Finally the door creaked open. It was Mark, my second son. He looked around nervously before stepping inside and locking the door behind him. "Are you alive?" he asked in a whisper. I didn't answer. I just stared at him. He knelt beside me and brought out a bottle of water and some leftover food. "I couldn't sleep," he said. I know what we did was evil. I didn't want to, Mama, I swear." I turned my face away. "You still did it," I said with a dry voice. Mark looked ashamed. "Papa said if I didn't join the others, he'd throw me out like a dog. He said you were cursed and needed punishment." I was scared. "You should be more scared now," I whispered. "Because you're part of the curse too." He flinched. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would be this bad. Please don't hate me." He left the food beside me and unlocked the door. "I'll come back at night. I'll try to help you escape." I wanted to believe him, but my heart was heavy. I ate the food slowly and drank the water like it was gold. That night I stayed awake, waiting to see if he'd keep his word. He did. He came back when everyone was asleep, opened the door carefully, and helped me to my feet. "We'll leave through the back gate," he whispered. "It's broken, remember?" My legs trembled, but I leaned on him. Every step was painful, but I kept moving. We reached the back of the house. The gate was still loose, and with a little push it opened. The cold night air touched my skin, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Mark helped me onto a wooden cart left behind the house. There's a clinic in the next village. We can hide there. As we rolled down the dirt path, I asked, "Why are you helping me now?" He looked away. "Because I had a dream last night. In the dream you were lying in a coffin and we were all crying. But your eyes opened and you cursed us. Fire came from your mouth, and Papa burned alive. I think it was a warning." I said nothing. But inside me a fire truly was growing. A fire that would burn everything they had built on my pain. When we reached the clinic, the nurse took one look at me and gasped. "Who did this to you?" she asked. I couldn't speak the truth. "Not yet. I fell," I lied. But as they treated me, something inside me screamed to fight back. I stayed at the clinic for weeks, healing slowly. Mark stayed nearby, bringing food and updates. One day he came with big news. "Papa thinks you're dead. I told him you ran into the forest and we never saw you again." "Good," I said. "Let him think I'm gone." Because I wasn't just healing. I was planning. I asked the nurse if I could stay and work as a cleaner. She agreed. I needed to earn money. I needed to be strong again. And more than anything, I needed to watch my enemies fall one by one. But just as things began to settle, something shocking happened. One morning, a young girl was brought into the clinic. She had bruises on her face and blood on her dress. "Who is she?" I asked. The nurse looked sad. "Her name is Anna. She says your son Matthew did this to her." My heart froze. Matthew. My third son. He had found a new victim. And I knew I had to stop him before he destroyed more lives like he destroyed mine. The night after the police came and went without doing anything, I stayed up staring at the ceiling. My bruises ached. My soul was tired. And my heart felt like it had stopped caring whether it beat or not. But something inside me whispered, "You have to fight back, Mary. Not for them. For yourself." I got up before sunrise. I dressed in silence and packed a small bag. In it I put the few important papers I had. My old ID card, some photos, my secret phone, and the notebook where I had written every single thing that happened to me. Every name, every date, every bruise. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew it was going to help me one day. I went to the backyard and dug up the spot behind the old mango tree. I had buried something there years ago. Money. I had been saving coins, bills, even small tips from sewing clothes for women in the neighborhood. My husband never knew. My sons never asked. The little box was still there, wrapped in a plastic bag and covered in old cloth. The money inside wasn't much, but it was enough. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I was calm, like a woman who had already died and come back. I packed the money and made tea like any normal day. When John woke up and asked for food, I gave it to him. When Daniel came to throw a rude word at me, I smiled. When my husband returned from town and barked at me, I bowed my head like always. But inside I was burning with a quiet fire. The next morning I visited a local church. I had heard they helped women like me. I walked in with a shaky voice and a swollen lip. The female counselor looked at me with warm eyes and didn't ask too many questions. She let me talk. She let me cry. "I'm tired," I told her. And that was enough. She offered to find me shelter. A women's home where I could stay and get help. But I shook my head. "Not yet," I said. "First, I must do something." She stared at me, confused, but she saw something in my eyes. Something determined. I thanked her and left my notebook with her. I told her, "If something happens to me, give this to the police. And to the news." She promised she would. That night I came home ready for war. I hid a small recorder under the shelf where I usually sat. I knew it was risky. I knew if they caught me I could die. But I needed the world to hear what was happening. At dinner I played dumb and kept smiling. As usual they insulted me. Then my husband asked the words that made my blood freeze. "Which of your sons will go first today?" Like it was nothing. Like I was not human. But I didn't flinch. I stood up. My husband raised his brow. "Where are you going?" "I'll be back," I said softly. I walked into my room and silently prayed they wouldn't hear the recorder. Came back. The boys were laughing now, drinking cheap gin and mocking me. Then Daniel, always the most aggressive, stood up and tried to grab me. But I stepped back. "Not tonight," I said. He laughed. "Since when do you decide?" "I do now," I said. He moved again. And then, mash. I grabbed the glass lamp on the table and broke it over his head. Blood gushed. He screamed. Everything happened fast. They jumped to their feet. My husband rushed toward me. I held the broken lamp base like a weapon. "Come closer, and I swear I'll end you," shouted. They all stopped. Maybe it was the blood. Maybe it was the madness in my eyes. But for the first time in years, they looked scared of me. Daniel was on the floor, groaning, holding his head. My chest heaved. I didn't know what would happen next, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Suddenly, I felt a strong grip on my arm. It was my third son, Victor, the one who always seemed quiet during the abuse. He didn't say a word. He just dragged me outside. I thought he was helping me escape. But I was wrong. He pushed me hard and I fell to the ground. "Traitor," he hissed. "You hurt my brother." I stared at him, broken-hearted. "You were the only one I thought had a soul." He spat near me and walked back inside. The door slammed. And I lay there in the dark, bleeding from my arm. I thought it was the end. Until I heard a soft voice behind me. "Ma'am, are you okay?" It was the neighbor's son. A boy barely 16. He had been walking home from the shop and saw everything. "Please help me," I whispered. He helped me up. Took me to his mother. They let me clean up and rest. But before I slept, I sent a message. One message. To the church woman. And to a local journalist I had met long ago. It was time. Time for the world to know. Time for me to get justice. Time to bring the house of monsters down. But just when I thought I had seen the worst. The next day, something happened that shook me more than anything else. My sons had taken a video of me, half naked, crying and begging, during one of the worst nights of abuse. And they had posted it online. For laughs. For shame. For revenge. That was the moment I knew. They would never stop unless I stopped them forever. The day I found out that my youngest son, Harry, had secretly sold the land I inherited from my grandmother without telling me, something inside me broke forever. I stood in front of what used to be our family land. A large empty patch of soil, fenced off and marked with red paint, the kind developers use to claim ownership. I trembled as I held the crumpled paper in my hand. The document had Harry's name signed at the bottom as the seller. He had done it behind my back. My own son. Tears clouded my eyes. That land was all I had left of my past. My memories. My peace. It was the only place I ever felt safe as a girl, running barefoot behind Grandma's hut, chasing chickens, hiding under mango trees when the sun was too hot. That land held the only happiness I had ever known. And now it was gone, sold to strangers for money I never even saw. I dropped to my knees, pressed my palms against the earth and screamed, "Why, Harry? Why?" The workers nearby turned to look at me, but I didn't care. Let them stare. My heart was breaking. Days later, Harry came home, acting like nothing had happened. I sat across from him in the living room, the document on the table between us. His eyes widened when he saw it. "Where did you get that, Ma?" "You sold the land, Harry. The land that belonged to my mother. You sold it without telling me. What for?" He scoffed and looked away. "You're too old to be managing land. You wouldn't know what to do with it. I needed the money. Besides, you still live here. What's the problem?" "The problem is you've become just like your brothers. Selfish, cold, cruel." He laughed, a loud, bitter laugh. "Cruel? You don't know what cruel is, Ma. We had a hard life too, you know. You always made it about you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You abused me. All of you. You joined your brothers and you let your father—" "Stop!" he shouted, standing up. "I don't want to hear that again." He stormed out of the house. And once again I was left in silence. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying every moment of pain. Every slap, every scream, Every night I cried into my pillow while they partied in the living room. I had taken it all for too long. Now they were stealing everything, my body, my dignity, my land. I lit a candle, got out my journal, and began to write everything down. Every date, every bruise, every name. It was time to prepare for the final step of my revenge. 2 weeks later, something strange happened. Henry, my second son, came home with his wife and child. His wife, Ruth, looked worried. "Ma," she said gently, "have you heard? There's a rumor going around that someone reported your sons to the police. About abuse."
I sipped my tea and gave a small smile. "Who would do such a thing?" I said softly, looking directly at Henry. He grew pale. The next morning, I was walking back from the market when I saw something that made my heart stop. My husband, Martin, was standing outside the house, bleeding from his head. His shirt was torn. He looked like he had been in a fight. I dropped my basket and rushed to him. "What happened?" "It was your sons," he muttered. "They beat me. Said I was bringing too much heat. That I should have kept quiet." I froze. My sons, his sons, had turned on him? "They said it's all your fault," he added bitterly. "They know you're trying to destroy us. You think you're smart, woman? This is just the beginning." He limped away, leaving a trail of blood behind him. For the first time, I felt something strange. Satisfaction. But that satisfaction didn't last long. That night, I found a letter slipped under my door. It had no name, no address, just 2 words in messy handwriting. "You're next." I clutched the paper and looked around the dark house. Who had written it? One of my sons? My husband? A stranger? I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went to the police station to follow up on the report I had filed weeks earlier. But when I got there, I was told something shocking. "Ma'am," the officer said, "the file is gone." Someone came in and removed it. "It's like your case never existed." My knees went weak. "What do you mean it's gone? I gave you everything. The bruises. The witness statements." He shook his head. "It's like someone higher up doesn't want this case going forward." As I stumbled out of the police station, I knew something terrible was coming, and it came faster than I expected. That night, my youngest son, Harry, the same one who sold my land, came into my room with a bottle of alcohol in his hand and an evil grin on his face. "You think you can take us down, Ma?" he slurred. "You think you're strong now? Let's see how strong you really are." He locked the door behind him. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. But this time, I had something waiting under my bed. A weapon. And I wasn't afraid to use it. I stood in the courtroom, my hands trembling, but my heart strong. My 4 sons sat on the bench, their faces blank, their eyes avoiding mine. My husband stood beside them, no trace of shame on his face. I had brought them all here. This was my moment of justice. The judge looked at me and said, "Madam Margaret, do you still want to continue with this case against your entire family?" I looked around the room. The courtroom was silent. The press was there. Neighbors were there. My story had already spread like wildfire. I took a deep breath and replied, "Yes, Your Honor. I want the truth to be heard. I want justice, not just for me, but for every woman who is suffering in silence." And so, I began to tell the court everything. I told them how my 4 sons, the children I gave birth to with love, had turned into monsters under the influence of their father. How they had abused me together one night while my husband stood at the door, laughing and telling them to continue. How I had bled and begged, but no one helped me. How my husband even told them afterward, "You should have done it harder." The entire courtroom gasped. A few people even started to cry. I saw one of the journalists shaking their head in disbelief. Then I told them how I planned my revenge, not with guns or poison, but with truth. With courage. with the power of the law. I told them how I recorded their threats, how I documented my wounds, how I visited the Women's Rights Center, and they helped me collect all the evidence. I had kept quiet for years, but when my grandchild, Emily, walked in on one of the abuses and screamed, I knew I had to act. I could not let the cycle continue. My lawyer presented the videos, the medical reports, even the audio of my husband saying, "She's just a woman. Our woman. We can do what we like." Suddenly, the silence was broken. One of my sons, Daniel, stood up in court and screamed, "Stop! Stop all of this. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to hurt her. But Dad forced us. He said he'd kill us if we didn't." Everyone turned to look at him. His face was wet with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom," he cried. "I'm so sorry." I cried too. I wasn't made of stone. My heart had always been a mother's heart. But I stayed strong. The judge listened to everything and said, "This is one of the most horrific cases of family abuse we have ever seen. All 5 of you, father and sons, will face the consequences of your actions." As the officers stood to arrest them, my husband finally showed fear. "Margaret," he said, "you can't do this. You're nothing without me." I looked him straight in the eye and replied, "I was nothing with you." He lunged toward me, screaming, but the officers held him back. "I will come back for you, Margaret. You'll see." As they dragged him away, the crowd clapped. The judge slammed his gavel. Court adjourned. After the case, I was taken in by a women's support group. They gave me a small house, where I lived in peace for the first time in years. Emily came to visit me often. She had changed too. She no longer had nightmares. She no longer cried in her sleep. One afternoon, Emily sat on my lap and asked, "Grandma, are the bad people gone forever?" I hugged her tight and whispered, "They are gone, my sweet girl. And they can never hurt us again." Months later, a journalist came to interview me. She asked, "If you could say something to other women out there suffering in silence, what would you tell them?" I looked at the camera and said, "No woman is weak. No mother should ever be treated like property. If you're being abused, speak up. If you're being broken, fight back. You are not alone." I thought I was a nobody, but when I spoke, the world listened. So can you. Your silence won't protect you, but your voice will. That interview went viral across the country. Thousands of women reached out, sharing their stories. I became a symbol of strength, of hope. Years later, when Emily grew up, she became a lawyer, fighting for women like me. She would often say, "My grandma taught me the greatest lesson: truth is power. Even if it hurts, speak it." And that, my dear listeners, is my true story. I was broken, but I rose. I was abused, but I fought back. I was alone, but now I stand with thousands. Because silence is the enemy, and I chose to speak. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional real-life stories. Share this with someone who needs strength today. And remember, your voice matters. Never be afraid to speak your truth. Thank you for watching.